Okay. Okay, so we're recording. All right, so I'm with Sacha Black. Sacha is the amazing author and leader of the Rebel Author Movement. Can I call it a movement? I'm going to call it a
Why
movement.
not?
I
Why
can do
not?
whatever I want. We're on my podcast now, Sacha.
Yeah.
Um, so she, um, yeah, Sacha does the Rebel Author podcast. And I think two absolute things that I love about what you're doing at the Rebel Author that have been a huge encouragement to me is your mix of like, hard-nosed action star-esque discipline with vulnerability. I think that's my favorite thing about you is how incredibly vulnerable you are, but how you also face the world with like bring all of your shit. I'm not afraid of any of it. So
Oh, I'm like awkwardly embarrassed.
that wasn't my goal. My goal was to make you feel comfortable.
I'm hiding behind my coffee. Thank you. That means an awful lot to me.
Yeah, and
To hide from it.
if you're an author listening to this and you're not listening to the Rebel Author podcast, you should turn this off and go listen to that. It's Sacha brings amazing interviews every week to that. That's really great. That have been super helpful to me. So I had the honor of looking at one of your pieces. That's an upcoming book, which I'm super excited about. So real quick, just give us a brief explanation of the book and like what's happening, because yeah, it was a really good piece.
Thank you. Yeah, and the piece is not the opening chapter as well, so I do have to give a bit of an explanation. Okay, so the book is called The Scent of Death, and I walked past a lamppost and the whole story more or less dropped into my head, and now it's a whole thing, and everybody sends me lampposts, and I love it. And I have a lamppost in my office now as well because of the lamppost story. Anyway, so yeah, the book is called The Scent of Death, and it is about I think his age keeps changing. Part of me wants to make him 19, part of me wants to make him 17. I'm not quite sure. The tone feels young adult, but equally, I may query it. And if I query it, I have to remove a large number of F-bombs that are in it. Are we allowed to?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
I made the decision very early that like I don't say whatever I want to say.
I would have to remove a lot of F-bombs. So sorry, my mum has just pulled up outside my office door, and it was unexpected, so I just sort of waved dramatically at her.
You're 100% fine. This is life in the times of COVID.
Okay,
there's an excellent chance that my 6-year-old will join me in a couple minutes. So
I love it. Yeah. Okay, so back to the story. Right, so this boy, Mallory, he is in a park. He's a bit of a delinquent, if you like. He comes from a very rough background, had a really poor upbringing, and despite that, he's sort of triumphing and trying to triumph and trying to make his life better and trying to make the people around him. Wait, I can't speak. What are words? Trying to make the lives of those around him better as well. And he gets punched on the nose by somebody who is either death or looks like death. You never know, you never find out, and that is sort of the point. And when he gets punched on the nose, he doesn't realize straight away, but he is then able to smell how people are going to die. And so he starts to stop people dying and becomes a bit of a new age like messiah in a way, and it causes chaos. There's riots, he gets very famous, realizes it's not really what he wants it to be, and then the whole premise of the story is based on a question, what happens if you can save everybody you love except what happens if you can save everybody except the person you love the most? And that's the question in the book. What happens? Yeah,
I love it so much. Yeah, and I love the whole image of like the whole question of like being able to predict death is really great. It reminds me a lot of Chuck Wendig's Blackbird series. Did you ever read that?
I have it. Funnily enough, I bought it recently because I really like his voice.
Yeah.
And so I want, I've read some of his nonfiction, but I haven't read his fiction. So I brought Blackbirds recently. I haven't read it though.
Oh, it's so good. It's you're going a very different route than Blackbirds, which is great. I think Blackbirds, the character always stays in obscurity and is very much very much can't save anybody. So that's the big like dark side of Blackbirds, is that she knows how everyone's going to die. She has to witness it all the time, but she can't actually do anything about it. So yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, so one of the things in this story is that whilst I suppose the philosophical question is like, are you really saving people? So the people that he saves are eventually going to die, no matter what he does. And so whilst he can prevent, and that's why I say prevent,
like
because it's prevent for
yeah.
prolong, exactly. Because and one of the, I'm fascinated by death and traditions, and I read a lot of books about more people that work in mortuaries and faith and traditions and different cultures, because I find the concept of death deeply fascinating, and the fact that we don't know what happens afterwards, and I find that deeply frustrating. And so I find that I'm constantly exploring it, and fate and destiny, and what do those things really mean. And so this is the first book I've ever written where I am actually really exploring that and trying to work out what it means, and that's why I've worked so hard on the characters to be like a different reflection of like that theme, I suppose.
Yeah. So let's talk about the characters for a minute, because you have really fantastic character voices, which is great and hard to do, right? Like grabbing character voices that sound unique is a really cool gift.
Which you partially gave me, so you need
to
take some credit there. I have already learnt loads from you, so.
So talk to me a little bit about Mal, your main character. Talk to me about his voice. And let me tell you what I saw, and then you can correct me, because I only saw 1,000 words. So right, like it's hard to gauge something that's going to be a full 50,000 word novel, potentially 1,000 words. But he was very kind of Matt Damon and Good Will Hunting to me. Rough around the edges, very like, I have no problem like pulling over my car in the middle of a playground and picking a fight with a guy I barely know, because at one point in kindergarten he kind of picked on me, but like super incredibly loyal to friends and family around him. Is that kind of the tone you're looking for?
100%.
Nice.
So he is like deeply loyal to a small group of people who he loves, and like without, what's the word, unconditionally. He has lost people. He lost his big brother when he was a child, and because they moved around a lot, because there was domestic violence in their past, he has been held back in school, but he is actually intelligent. So he's got this what's the word, this disconnection between the fact that actually he is relatively bright, but unfortunately he's been held back, and so he has a lot of people look at him as if he is scum, as if he's stupid. He's a bit of an outcast, and yet has this core group of people who, these misfits, this band of misfits that have come together. And he is. Can you hear that? That's my cat. I'm so sorry.
That's awesome. What's your cat's name?
Grim, Lady Grim, ruler of deviants, perfect. Scallywags, and rebels.
I love it.
That's actually her name as well. So Mallory, and the other thing to say about Mallory is he's very much from London. I really wanted him to sound like he came from London, very common London, even though he's bright. So there's this as you get further into the story, you can see that he is intelligent in the way that he's talking, but often the words that come out are very basic, common, slangy sort of language. But I don't want him speaking Cockney rhyming slang. So it's London without the Cockney rhyming slang.
Yeah, and it's really great. I'm going to share the screen real quick so we can talk about it. And again, I haven't said this yet, but I've said it in a previous podcast. So much of editing voice is about style, right? Like, so whenever so I'm saying this, Schatzer, because people see what I edit and they're like, wow, you cut so much. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The more I like it, the more invested in it I am, and the more notes I'm going to leave. So like,
Yeah, yeah.
this piece was amazing, and you could literally just take it and leave it alone. But when you give me something really fun, I'm like, I'm going to play with it. So
Yeah.
like, it was really great. So it's like, I wanted, I liked it so much. I wanted it to be more. So I just want to say that because like when people look at my edits, I think especially as new writers, like when I was a new writer, if somebody like crossed out a line of mine, I was like wounded. I was like, oh, they don't
Yeah, yeah.
like it. But you know, I think the more we write, the more we learn. Like, no, this is like editing is a conversation about like what
Mm-hmm.
what is and possibilities. And so this is a beautiful piece. And the truth is, if I were to edit again, I would actually do very different things. So, let's talk about. But I wanted to come back to Mal's voice because some of the things you're doing with him, even in the untangibles, like I don't know what an inner city London accent feels like, but
Mm-hmm.
I can feel just from who Mal is, um, that you know um, kind of self-reliance and inner
Yep.
kind of chip that comes from struggling with poverty. Which
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I think I'm so attracted to the book now that we talk about it is one of the themes in my work that I love to bring out is how people in power misunderstand the impoverished. So like that's a big
Mm-hmm.
in all of my books. All of my heroes come from like inner city impoverished neighborhoods, because I liked that tension. But like this, so first off, the opening of, well, you had some opening up here which is really good, which needs to be brought back. But the opening of Mal's first action, Mal walked and smoked his way through the woods toward the park. He reached the end of his third consecutive cigarette. He glared at the flag, wishing he could taste it, but he couldn't taste anything. His nose all mashed up. That right there is the perfect. Like, I love the image you're giving of Mal right away in this like chain smoking through a park and frustrated with his cigarette because it has that very like the world has screwed me over type attitude, which is great. Like it's a great introduction to him.
That's a thing as well, because his best friend only smokes cigars and he can't stand the smell or taste of cigars. So it's really important that I keep that, because it's like a juxtaposition,
Yeah.
or it's like a contradiction on his best friend.
Yeah, and it's great. Like I love how you're bringing in little details like that into the characterization, because those kind of details will really set the characters apart, right? Like those little fun things really like acknowledge that like the characters are different in some ways and speak to who they are, and allows the reader metaphorical contrasts in their personalities to like compare the two of them. But I highlighted this sentence because I love it so much. The fire red butt glared back at him like an angry drunk, as if the cigarette had the problem with him and not the other way around. That's such a freaking fantastic line.
I,
Um,
I I've been studying like personification quite a lot. Like a lot of really good writers like use it in strange ways
yeah,
or unexpected ways. They subvert like with the personification. Terry Pratchett's a master of it. But yeah, and so like if people are looking for tips, then go and really like actively try and search for examples of personification, because it comes up in unusual ways, and I think that's when you use it to its best effect.
yeah, yeah. The response of the cigarette to his glare is
Yeah.
is beautiful. That's such a great thing. So I cut this opening part about the narrator. To wrap up that first conversation, I love Mal, and I think the character voice is really strong, really great. We come down here later with Tina, who is this kind of bully who's picking on Pearl. Um, Tina also has sorry, I'm looking for a good line to read from Tina. Here we go. This is a great one. Uh, Tina Myers, that girl was more trouble than she was worth. Mal considered backing away, leaving them to it. Fend for yourself, girl. Learn the hard way. Tina usually wins. But then Tina said, listen, love, I don't know who you think you are, but if you don't give me the fucking bag, I'm going to smash that pretty little face of yours into next week. Got it? Right? Like perfect, like bully voice, like, just setting up that you've got minions around her. Like it's her characterization's really great. That like tough, in your face, I want what I want and I'm going to take it. But then what's great about what you do with her voice that I really liked is the minute Mal stands up to her, she backs away and she leaves, right? Like, so it's a
Typical
really,
classic bully,
yeah,
all
classic
mouth,
bully.
no trousers.
Yeah, and you get a beautiful comparison between her and Mal, which is, presentation of tough versus actual tough, which is a nice, again, like a nice contrast between the two characters, that like he's reluctant to enter, but once he enters, he's in. She's reluctant to leave, but once it's clear the retreat has started, she's gone, right? Like
Mhm.
there's no in between. And it's a really nice, in this scene, protagonist antagonist contrast where they're like contrasting with each other. I really love that. So another thing you did that I totally missed when I read, and then you explained, and I was like, oh, that's really great. Talk about how you're using the narrator voice in the piece.
Okay, so the narrator is not the protagonist, which I really wanted to play with in a book. Usually, you will find the protagonist is the person narrating, but I really didn't want to do that. So the narrator has a very much a reminiscent, what's the word, more less common, more refined, more whimsical, sort of reflective type voice. And what I want to do with that is to have sections of it. So when we are mostly with Mal, then I want Mal's voice very much to sound like he is describing things to the reader, even though there is a narrator. So, and this narrator will come in at different points, and then what will happen, like the narrator will very much be there in the beginning, and I'm not sure yet whether or not I want to break the fourth wall. Part of me wants to break the fourth wall at the beginning, because there will definitely be a fourth wall break at the end.
Yeah. For
But I'm
those
not
that don't
sure.
know, just explain for a second what you mean by break the fourth wall.
Okay, so breaking the fourth wall, when you are watching a play in a theatre, the characters are very much on stage, and then there is a gap, and then you are in the audience, and you are separate from that play. You are watching the action that happens. When one of the actors breaks the fourth wall, they talk directly to you as the audience. So this breaking the fourth wall in literature would be when the narrator or a character speaks directly to you as the reader.
Yep.
Deadpool is a really good example of this in a movie.
Yeah, Deadpool's great. He does it really well.
Yeah. And so the reason I want to do that is because of who the narrator is. And that is one thing I'm not going to reveal. Because, so there is a twist on who the narrator is and what happens to that narrator at the end. And so this is why there is a very stark difference between Mal's voice and the narrator's voice.
Yeah. And it's really well done. I actually cut it because I felt the narrator's voice was very out of sync with Mal's voice.
Which is the point.
Yeah, not. And then you told me, I was like, oh yeah, that should all stay. It reminds me very much of Mark Zukakis's, I'm probably butchering his last name, The Book Thief. Have you read that one?
I have that literally on my bed
You
to
gotta read
start
it.
one book from the next. I'm going to read the TJ Clunes. It's been very popular this year, the House on Cerulean Sea or something.
Oh, I haven't heard that one yet. I'll have to check that out.
Apparently it's beautiful. And then I'm reading The Book Thief, but it's on my bedside table to read.
So I think what you're going to love about that, talking about like a narrator that breaks the fourth wall, the narrator in The Book Thief is the Grim Reaper, is Death.
Yes, that's why I've been told to read it.
Yeah. And he's totally unseen by the cast. Like they don't know that he's there, but he's always there. And it gives this really fantastic, I think the hard thing about that, like, perspective narrator that fills that gap between the reader and the story, the hard thing is nailing that voice.
Oh,
because
definitely.
the reader's going to spend a ton of time with that character. Like you're adding in essence a second protagonist that the reader like needs to empathize with. And like the reader needs to appreciate that protagonist's perspective. And so what Zukakis does right up at the front, again, butchering his name, he's one of my favorite authors too, and I'm just destroying his name.
I just brought
Um,
The Messenger as well, I think it's
oh,
called,
that
another
one's
book.
fun.
I
That one's
am the
so
messenger.
fun.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. It's less, you can, feel like as authors, when we read somebody's book, we can almost place it in their career. We can be like, okay, this is his third book. This
Yeah.
is his first book. The
Yeah.
Messenger is definitely his first like published book. You read it and you're
Okay.
like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot. It's a great story. It's so much fun. It has some plot problems.
It's all
But
right. It's all right. I
yeah.
get very awkward when people tell me they're about to read my first published book because I'm like,
Oh dear
oh,
Lord.
are you?
Yeah, I actually took mine
Um,
down off of Amazon. I'm rewriting it right now, but I took it down off of Amazon. You can still get like paperback copies, but I was like, we're not putting any of those ebooks into the
yeah.
world.
I'm toying with the idea of bringing it down. The problem is I can't. It's a bit too late because I've written the third and fourth books in the series, and the problems are. I mean, the prose is okay, but there's
Yeah.
you can see issues with it. The problem is that it's very much one of those very first series where you put everything into the fantasy world and
Yep.
overcomplicate everything, and then I'm like, I'm 4 books in. I'm not changing it now. Like I've only
Yeah.
got one book left to write. Fuck it, it's
Oh,
going out.
talking about plot problems, sorry, this is a total aside, but my first book that was like real fiction, because my first book was like a fictionalized memoir, which, you know, I should have really just been put in a drawer somewhere. Um, my first, what I would call like my first real book, I have an aversion to guns. I think growing up in the city, the only time I ever encountered a gun was when it was pointed at me. So like I just kind of like grew up with this, like, I don't like to be around guns because they're always pointed at me. So, so I don't like them in my fiction either. So like I try to work around them. I totally wrote my first dark fantasy superhero monster novel with no guns. And then I realized at the end of as I was finishing the book, I was like, this is a problem and I need to explain in the world why I have no guns. I was like, I'll take care of it in book 2.
Mm.
So I put book 1 out. It's going really well, right? Like it's like I got up to like 30 reviews really fast. I was like, this is great. And then one of the like big Amazon reviewers grabbed it and reviewed it. And he wrote like 4 paragraphs in his review about why are there no guns in this book? I was like, ow, he nailed me. I was like, oh, they're so bad. But yeah, anyway, talking about first books and things we'd go back and change.
Oh, I love
I
it.
wouldn't put
Love
guns in. I just explain why there aren't in in the first book, and not that you try to get to the middle of the second book before I solve this major plot hole.
it.
Um, anyway,
We've all been there. No, honestly, like I'm laughing because I'm like, I 100% understand your pain.
yeah, no,
And that's why I'm like, I need to get this book out and done because it's so much better than like my first book, and
yeah,
especially because I write nonfiction about writing, so everyone's
yeah.
like looking into me going, is this your fiction? I'm like, no, but it's not,
Sure.
just wait.
Since I've started doing this podcast, I'm like, I'm taking everything down.
Yeah.
Everything is. No one
No,
reads
don't do
anything
that.
I wrote. Yeah.
Don't do that. All you have to do is make it very clear that everybody has a first book, and that happened to be my first book. So that's why
Right.
I'm like, this bad boy needs to come out because I know the voice is so much better and the prose is so much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. And I had a first 10 books, so you shouldn't read any of the first 10. Don't
Yeah,
read.
it
Don't
was just
read.
my first series, let's be
Yeah.
honest.
People always ask me, they're like, so if I want to read one of your books, which one's the best one to read? I'm always like, the next one. The
Yeah.
next one. The next one's the best one.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So going back to Zukakas and the narrator, it's that like you're bringing that additional voice in that adds this kind of beautiful texture on top of the whole plot.
But you
So
actually made a good point because you did say there was a disconnect, and I heard
yeah,
that, and I think what I need to do is have scene breaks. So have like the little scene break symbol between the narrator talking and then going into a scene where Mal is and there's action.
if I can make a recommendation, I would do it
Yeah.
differently. I would
Okay.
have it so right now the narrator is this kind of like non-personified third person.
Mm-hmm.
I would lean more into it so that the narrator is having a conversation with the audience.
Okay.
So that you have things in here like, you know, you see Mal there, look at him walking, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
look at how he does this thing.
I think
That's what,
I I
and
think
that's
I've
what
been afraid to
Zukakis
do
does
that.
brilliantly. What'd you say?
I think I've been afraid to do that, so you may have just given me permission.
No,
Like
just lean
I
into it.
have I have scenes where it there are like, and I haven't put them in the story because I'm like, oh, is this too bold? Like I'm not sure if I should do this. So I sort of got rid of them and squirreled them away. And so yeah,
Well,
I feel like you've given
you
me
know what people say
permission.
about the greatest works of literature. People always say about the greatest works of literature, I love it because it was so moderate. So just
Yeah,
lean
that's
in.
a very good point.
Just lean
Also,
in.
as a rebel, I should just say fuck it and get on with
Yeah,
it.
just lean into it totally. And as you read the book Thief, you'll feel it because he does. Speaking of personification, one of my favorite lines of literature of all time comes from that book. He's see, and I may screw it up, but this is how it is in my mind. They're in a basement during a air raid, uh, where like bombs are dropping all around the small village they live in, and they're waiting for the bombs to drop. I apologize for that. That's my alarm. They're waiting for the bombs to drop, and uh, the Death said the silence punched and kicked in the empty
Oh,
space.
I love it.
Oh, I read it. I was like, oh my gosh, that line right there.
Yeah.
But he has so like talking about that like voice of the narrator. He does a whole like um thing where Death sees more colors, right? Like so, giving the narrator their own characterization. He does a whole
Hmm.
thing where Death sees more colors. So like the narrator will start up a chapter describing the sunset with like 15 different colors, and like it allows Death to comment not just on what's happening in the plot but also like on the colors that Death is like on the world, and so like it gives Death its own voice. And that's I think that's where I would recommend you take this narrator is just push them further.
You
um
have given me so much to think about, and my brain is worrying so hard right now. I'm probably going to break out in a sweat because I'm like, this is like 100 shades of genius. Because what I have to do with the narrator is because the narrator is in the story, I have to differentiate the narrator in the narrator of the story with who that person is in the story, because I want their voices to be slightly different.
yeah,
There needs to be some connection, but they have to be different enough that the reader can't twig who it is immediately. And given that smell is so important in the story, I'm wondering if there's something I can do with smell, and something to do with a very particular smell. I don't know
yeah,
what I but you are making me think hard, and I love this, so thank
good.
you.
Well, yeah, and so the way the way I would wrap up that like recommendation is the way you're introducing Mal here with these physical characteristics that like very much define his characterization. You need
Hmm.
that with the narrator too.
Okay.
You need to define the narrator some way for us so that they become a tangible thing that we can grasp into.
I love
um
it. Yeah.
okay, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, because the piece is really beautiful, I would actually just sit here and read it to everybody if that didn't keep you on the line for like 4 hours. It actually wouldn't, but nobody wants to hear me read. I am not a narrator. You have these scenes where you go from Mal putting out the cigarette to you had a line that said shouting broke out ahead, a right kerfuffle. Mal dropped the fag end, stomped it out, and ran around the corner to the Parks Junction. I said, "Give me the bag." Tina Myers, the school bitch, and her three bitch hound minions had some poor lass circled, and I said, "Fuck off." The encircled girl spat. So it's a great opening scene of like launching Mal into action. It's really nice, and this is a meet cute, and so it's a really so meet cute is that moment where your love interests meet for the first time, and it's
Hmm.
very much defining of their relationship, right? Like readers expect the meet cute to be the kind of underlying tension between the two characters, and in essence like what keeps them apart is what is established in the meet cute. So like, you know, I think the classic romance novel is always Pride and Prejudice. It seems like every romantic comedy goes back to Pride and Prejudice, but Darcy and Elizabeth, she has an attraction from afar, but when she actually talks to him, she's like, oh my gosh, this guy is the worst. And so like that establishes kind of where the whole book goes, is that he looks to be one way, but when he talks, he's a completely different way. And there's a lot of like aristocracy in there that separates them. So anyway, we're setting up a meet cute here, and this is a really brutal meet cute, because it's got the like, rescuing hero scene. And this is a great, like, what I love about it, sorry, I'm just blabbing. What I love about it is getting into the meet cute where we're in the middle of this like fight between the characters. So you don't expect this to be a meet cute, right? Like
Yes.
that's what I was trying to get around. All those words just to say it's unexpected.
Yes.
That's the word I needed.
And that is so key to how the love interest is. She gives him whiplash constantly. And so maybe we can talk about the end, because you put in a little bit of stuff that I would put afterwards. So, because I agreed with your comments.
I can't bring it. We gotta wait. We gotta come here first.
Sorry.
No, you're great. I do want to talk about the end, but I want to talk about this first. So I added 3 lines in here where we get to see him, we get to hear him witness what the fight sounds like, right? Like, so taking this line out, shouting broke out ahead, a right kerfuffle. Either leaving that line and then explaining it, or taking it out and letting us hear the kerfuffle. Part of that is there a really great psychologist, Brene Brown, who's super famous, has this incredible thing in her books about the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? And so she says, like, if somebody falls down in a hole, empathy is getting down in the hole with them. Sympathy is looking from the top of the hole and offering them a sandwich, right? Like, so there's that, like, empathy is alongside someone, whereas sympathy is like, oh man, you're in the shit now, that sucks for you. So with our readers, we want our readers to sympathize, to empathize, not sympathize. We don't want our readers to look at Mal and go like, oh, there's a fight, too bad. Like, so that's why I would add dialogue into some of these places. So here I added a bunch, and then down here, Tina and Mal actually get in a fight, and yours was beautifully succinct. And I'm adding words literally just to force empathy, right? Like to force us into the hole with Tina. At this point would actually be the one in the hole, because Mal's sitting on her chest, but to like force us to feel.
I love it. Also, yeah. I am like I'm like a really bad underwriter in my first drafts. And my critique partner is like, you need to put the emotion back in, because I'm like, I always joke that I'm like dead on the inside, but really I am. And so like that's why my first drafts never have get any emotion in. So I love that you did this and you helped me and you showed me how, because this is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, so we just have to pull it out. And if you think of it like, I tend to graph it in my head, which I know is weird, but if you have the beats of the story on the bottom axis, and you have, actually, okay, I'm just going to pull this up. I'm not supposed to show anybody this, but I'm going to show it to you, and nobody else will see this because it's just us talking. This is something I'm actually working on with the course I'm running right now. And so it's something I'm like,
is it going to be in your book?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be in the fucking tomb. Yeah, but this is something I'm working on with the course I'm running right now, working them through how to do this. So if you have the chapter beats on the bottom and the character emotional state on the top, right? Like, so down here I would have like Mal walking, smoking a cigarette. Mal hears about the fight. Mal watches the fight. Mal confronts Tina, Mal and Pearl, right? Like, so you've got kind of like 5 beats across here. What we don't want is, let me see if I can be fancy and actually like make a shape, maybe. What we don't want is like an emotional state that's low, and then, oh, it's not gonna let me do it. There we go. And then an emotional state that's high, and then an emotional state that's low, and then an emotional state that's high, right? Like, we don't want this like jerky thing. And that's not actually what you're doing. What I would say you're doing is you're giving us this emotional state here, and then this emotional state here. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing in between, right? Like we don't know what the emotions are in these beats. So we just need to smooth it out. But the ideal is that we have kind of a clean line, right? That kind of like gives us a clean emotional state that the reader can see
Mm-hmm.
and feel, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like stretching out the scene so that the reader knows what the emotional flow of the
Mm-hmm.
scene is, right? Like across the beats, how the emotion is changing, if it's going up, if it's coming down, if it's going up and then down, and giving us that like smooth line of emotion so that the reader can feel the reader can empathize and enter into those feelings with the characters. um so, and a lot of that just requires us as writers empathizing with the characters, which I'm excited to see you do more because you're such a vulnerable person that has such a deep empathy that empathizing with the characters, even though you say you're done on the inside, I totally don't believe it at all. And because you are so
Don't call
vulnerable.
me out live on a podcast, God.
Sasha's never coming back.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, Jeff said too many things about me personally and not enough about the work. Um, so yeah, so you're, but all that to say, like, I'm excited about where you're going. So let's talk about the ending.
Mm-hmm.
So the ending, I also stretched out because you ended the ending with Pearl punching him in the stomach and then having a one-liner, and then the scene went black.
Right. So the thing with Pearl is she is like the epitome of unexpected. She is going to constantly keep him on his toes and surprise him. And so what happens is she literally basically Pearl does not need saving. She is a badass woman. She is strong, she is powerful, she is she loves philosophy, and she always uses the wrong words, but she loves philosophy nonetheless, and she has big ideas and deep thoughts, and also she ain't gonna ever let anyone control her. Nobody's gonna take charge. She doesn't need no knight in shining armor, and so there's Mal thinking he's saving the dame, which for all his background, he wants to save people, and she's beautiful, and so he tries to save her by getting Tina out the way, and then he makes a mistake of taking one of her rhubarb and custard sweeties, and so she pays him by socking him in the stomach because she didn't ask to be saved anyway.
Yeah.
And so she wallops the sweet out of his mouth, and then gives him a kiss because ultimately he did actually save her, and so he's like stunned by this whiplash and utterly falls in love with her in that moment because she both punched him and kissed him.
Yeah.
And so your critique was that you felt it was too quick, and I completely understand. But I think what I would do, because I want that immediate whiplash of punch in the stomach to kiss, I will put stuff afterwards rather than before.
And I love, like like we were saying at the beginning, like edits are all about style and choices.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you're making that intentional choice of putting them right together. I think it's really great. Yeah, I would ignore my edits completely. It's really good.
No, I don't want to ignore them completely, because I think you made a really good point about a meet cute, and this was the point that struck me. You said a meet cute shouldn't be, it's like a really poignant moment. It should be more. You have to give the reader more, and I 100% agree. And I think the discussion is at what point I do that, because the punch kiss was very intentional, and so I think it's about how I round off that scene.
Yeah, I think the punch kisses, I think somehow getting those back to back in the text is important.
Yeah.
Because I do like what you're saying, the like jolting nature of it, which is what I felt when I was editing. I was like, man, there's like whiplash here. And like you said, yeah. So I think you totally accomplished that. We do need to sit with them.
Yes,
A couple
I
seconds.
agree.
Yeah. And
I
I don't know how you sit with them, but we do need to, maybe she walks away, like he watches her walk away. And like in watching her walk away has kind of like some ruminations. This is a great moment to bring back the narrator.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that's a really good idea. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I completely agree though, and I am going to think about it. Part of me was like, do they, yeah, something about walking off. They're definitely, no, I basically, what I'm saying is I completely agree with your challenge, and I am going to go away and work on this. And at the moment, I don't know whether it's her walking away, them walking off together, the narrator coming back in.
yeah,
But I feel like I need to take the consequence deeper. So the consequence of the punch kiss, both from her perspective, his perspective, and the narrator's perspective. So I'm going to go, and I can't give you the answer now because I have to percolate. But
yeah. No, absolutely. I think there's another thing about the narrator that's interesting that Zukakis does, and I'm trying to think of another example um, in literature that has that fourth wall breaker. But there's a rhythm to it that's really important, right? Like Zukakis, the narrator starts every scene and usually ends every scene, but you
mhm.
don't hear the narrator at all in the middle.
Yeah, see,
So
that's really what I was trying to do. But okay, I'm gonna now go and put the book thief at the
yeah,
top of my pile.
so there's, but you need that, like the reader needs to expect when the narrator is going to show up, because the narrator is actually going to signal the beginning and end of a scene.
Yeah, okay,
Or
I
just
like
the
that.
beginning of a scene, right? Like however so this would be a great place. I would say this would be a great place to bring the narrator back,
Yes, I
only if you
agree.
plan for the narrator in scenes.
No, no, but you are so right, because the whole point of the narrator is the reminiscing reflection.
Mhm.
And whilst we're reminiscing, that's it. That's it. It's reminiscing at the top, reflecting at the bottom.
Yeah,
So the top of the
that's
scene
good.
is the reminiscing, the end of the scene is the reflection. And so, oh,
Yeah.
epiphanies. I love it. Oh my
And
God. I'm so excited to dive in.
yeah, part of what I love that you're doing here with Mal and Pearl is this, like in the meet cute, to just off the top of my head to bring up one more topic, is setting up these, like there's so many potential themes here for Mal of like, what does manhood mean? What does it mean to be a partner? Like, because you're really challenging the like knight in shining armor um picture of him, the like, I'm here to save the damsel in distress, right? Like, well, this damsel doesn't need saving. Like,
Mhm.
so I really love the implications for him as a character, and I love the kind of stereotype gender breaking implications for Pearl as well. I think it's a really great setup.
And you know the lesson that he has to learn?
What's that?
Not everybody wants saving.
Oh, that's great. This is a great meet cute for that.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly. And
really fantastic.
that is exactly why I had to have the punch kiss,
Oh,
because I was like, this is, and the thing is, and this is what I love when authors do this. They put the theme front and center, and they try and make the character learn the lesson right at the start, right
yeah.
up front, and they never learn it until the end. And
Yeah,
that's why I wrote it this way.
I love it. Yeah, the book is a conversation about learning the lesson. It's so great. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I just wanted to say a huge thank you, because I loved this conversation. I loved the challenge. And I love
Thank
how
you.
much you've
This
made
is
me
fun.
think. And everybody needs to dive on your courses. They need to read that book that you haven't published yet about.
It's coming.
Um,
It's coming in the spring.
where's the fucking time,
Yeah, where's the
Jeff?
fucking tub? It's right there on my
Yeah.
the note is on my bulletin board. Yeah, no, it's coming. I think I'm slow to write about dialogue because and part of the reason I'm doing this course right now, so I have 15 people in a course that they're actually they're getting way too much, Jeff. They're getting 70 hours of videos from
Oh
me
my goodness me.
over 20 weeks, and then we also have a Slack channel where we're doing like personal coaching, which is just, it's a lot of me. But I'm having too much me. So but part of that is I think these are all techniques I developed in writing nonlinear plotted simulations. So learning how to communicate those to, like, learning how to get what's in my head into actual, like, a communicated way is tough. And it's nice because Laura, who's my boss in my day job, who taught me to write nonlinear simulations, is doing the course with me. So like we're leading it together. So she's really helping me like flush out that stuff together. So yeah, it's coming. I'm just intentionally being slow so that I can actually say rather than just like vomiting out what's in my head, actually like say things that will help people.
What I will tell you is that in my rounds of writing nonfiction, the best thing you can do is just vomit the shit onto the page and
Yeah.
structure it afterwards, because nonfiction book structure is the hardest part about writing nonfiction. And ultimately, if you can just get it on the page, the structure will change. No matter how many times you plan and replan and re-outline the structure, it changes anyway once you start writing.
Really
and that's why when I get my covers designed, because I always get my covers designed early, I can never tell the designer how many steps the book's going to be, because it changes.
That's really funny. Yeah, you don't want to be locked into 5 steps when there's going to be 9.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good word. And I am journaling a ton. Is my journal here? My journal's here. Yeah, I am journaling a ton right now about it.
If you want an offline conversation at any point to try and help encourage and push you into getting that book done, I am here for you. I am here for you. Just drop me a message. And
yeah, the problem, honestly, Sacha, sorry, this is the podcast. Just hold on, podcast. You can chill out. Please, if you listen to this, you know, like Chips is going to do whatever the hell he wants. So he doesn't. I'm just talking to fun people. The problem I'm having, honestly, with the nonfiction thing is that right now it's not very relatable. It's all just technical. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay.
Do you know what? Do you know what you have to do?
Huh?
It's ironic. You have to find the voice. You have to find your voice, right?
I know. As somebody who's full of self-loathing, finding my own voice is very difficult. Much rather write fiction. Yeah. All right. Well, that's enough about that. Yeah. So it's coming. It's just slow. Sacha, thanks so much. This was amazing.
Oh, thank you. This has been an absolutely amazing session. I'm super grateful. And I hope that other people have found it useful and taken some tips and tricks from it in our discussion.
I hope so too. That's the goal, right? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and we can talk for another